Okay, so I'm gonna move forward. If you go to the website for the workshop, underneath the Getting Started tab, there's information about how to install or to create, how to install the Bing and Edge browser, how to create an account on ChatGPT, and then how to create an account with Bard. So you guys are welcome to do this on your own time. Hopefully you've already done this as part of the pre-work. The next tab across the top says Prompt Engineering, and that's the section that we're going to begin right now. Okay, so this diagram, let's see if I can get this to where it's just on the screen. Okay, so this diagram was created by the United Nations in a recent working paper about when is it safe to use ChatGPT. And so I think this is a pretty good rule of thumb that you guys should start to think about. So the first question is, does it matter whether or not the outputs are true? So if I'm writing computer code, it may not matter if it gives me bad code because I can look at that code and figure out if it's right or not. If I'm trying to write, for example, a legal brief based off of Supreme Court precedent and ChatGPT gives me some results, it probably matters whether or not that is true. And we have a link to a lawyer who in fact turned in a brief that he had ChatGPT write. It generated many false cases which never existed, and he's in a lot of trouble now. So our ability to determine whether or not things are true doesn't necessarily mean that we can't use ChatGPT. So if we can verify whether or not the results that it's giving us are true or false, that's a good first step. If we don't understand what happens if we produce inaccurate information, this could be for health, it could be for our jobs, it could be for a legal proceeding. It's probably not a good idea to use ChatGPT. If you understand what you're doing and you understand the consequences of using this thing, then perhaps it is safe to use it. I didn't include things like, should you use this in your college class to create an essay? So that probably fits under the moral responsibility of no. So we have a section on ethics that I believe Heidi is going to go over in about an hour. We've linked to the technical documentation for those of you that like to read technical documents. But what I'd like to move on to, and I've just covered the fact that we're going to be writing things in what's called Markdown syntax. This website is actually itself written in Markdown, and I render this using a web editor. So we're going to start talking about our prompt writing. So ChatGPT uses a thing called a prompt. So it's this instant messaging window that we've been familiar with now for 25, 30 years. But you begin a conversation by starting to type text into this prompt window. When you submit a query or a statement to ChatGPT, it is taking that information and running it through its large neural network brain and basically creating a path for itself to create a response. The words that ChatGPT generates it's not actual intelligence. It's not thinking. It cannot reason. What it's doing is it's basing probabilities of the prompt that you generated and the subsequent words that it generates. Every word that it writes, it's generating a probability for the next word that it should write. And so if you give ChatGPT a very short prompt, so they call this zero-shot prompting. It's one way that they evaluate the accuracy of ChatGPT. But if I just ask it with less than 10 words for 5 examples of something, this is all it has to do when it dives off the podium into this deep pool of knowledge. And so it's going to squiggle all the way through to the bottom, and it's going to come out with an output. That output may not be very accurate. And so you can make your prompts more accurate essentially by making them longer and giving it more information. And so you can establish a single shot prompt by adding in a specific focus area that you may want it to work on. You can do a multi-shot prompt by giving it multiple examples. The more information you give this, the more likely it is to give you the type of result that you're looking for. And so we're limited into the size of our prompts. A lot of us just want to write one sentence and ask this thing to do something. The current GPT-3, the free one, you can use up to, I think it's 4,000 or 2,000 tokens. A token is a unit that these large language models use. The token is based off of generally characters and language. So usually I've seen about 4 characters is one token. Sometimes it's less. But on average, a token can be thought of about 3/4 of one word. So with up to 2,000 tokens, you can write about 1,500 words or about 3.5 pages of text. So if you have tried to use ChatGPT to edit a essay that you wrote yourself, you could probably get it to work because your essay is probably less than 5 pages. If you give it a book, let's say we give it Harry Potter, it's not going to be able to read all of Harry Potter at once, and it's going to puke. So what we want to do is give it a significant enough prompt that it can then generate its response. This includes things like what I'm going to get into a second around priming, but the prompt can be a little bit longer than I think what most of us are using it for right now. And when we get into the plugins, you'll see how it is actually using URLs and other summaries from other websites to generate its output. So your prompt can be 3 to 6 pages right now with the free version. If you go and you pay for ChatGPT 4 and you get access to the larger model, you can actually input up to about 100 pages of text. So this is getting into the novella range of chat size. So we're still not to Harry Potter yet, right? We can't drop the entire Harry Potter book series, which I think is something like 1.5 million words, and have it write a sequel. But probably in the next 3 years, we will. So at this point, we're dealing with short stories, novella type inputs, and then it can rewrite those for us, or it can generate new output from those. So what I want to suggest is that when you write a prompt, you want to give it a structure. And so the first thing that you want to tell the language model to do is to establish what it is and how it's going to act. So you give it a role. That role could be something like, I want it to be a copy editor, a paper reviewer, a mentor. I want it to be a computer or a software language interpreter. So by establishing the role in the first few lines of your prompt, you're now narrowing down the potential range of responses that this thing is going to generate for you. And so I've tried to get into the method of always saying, I want you to act as something. And then I begin asking my next set of questions in my prompt. Okay, so the second thing we want to say is to give it a task. So we want it to do something. And so that could be just about anything, as we're going to see in the next hour or two. And then the last step is to say what kind of format you want it to give it as. So it can be a translator. It can create output as copyable text, so copy-pasted text that you can take to another document. It can write code. And so you can establish what kind of output you want it to give you. So that prompt now is going to be probably on the order of 50 to 150 words. And then you're going to have it do this thing. I've closed this little admonition box here, but there's, go ahead. Yes, so we're going to get to that in a second. There's a thing called linking or chaining. So whenever you create a conversation, every subsequent prompt is going to have a relationship to the prior prompt. Oh yeah, so the question was, if you follow up with subsequent prompts, are they related to the priors? Yeah, so when you're having a conversation with ChatGPT in a single chat, remember that it's still thinking about that first prompt that you gave it. And so that's how you can get into this state where it's hallucinating. You've given it all this different information that's probably unrelated, and it's trying to give you something to make sense, but those probabilities have now been blown out the window. So it's always okay to just go restart a new chat session and get going again. This link that I went to for awesome lists, so I'm querying the word awesome in ChatGPT. For those of you that use GitHub, 77,000 stars is a lot. So this thing has more stars now than like some major Python packages for research. But this person or this community of people have curated a set of awesome ChatGPT prompts. And so we can scroll down here and to get through all their sales for themselves. So you can see these prompts. So they're saying, I want you to act as a terminal. And I'll type a command and you'll respond as though you were a terminal. So they're getting this thing to act like it's a computer. Act as an English translator, as an interviewer, as a JavaScript console, as an Excel spreadsheet. And so you can start to establish your prompt by giving it a role, setting the context, and then telling it how you want it to respond. Okay. I'll pause for just a second. So I'm using the Edge browser right now, and I've logged into my U of A account. So in the upper right, there's this little Bing chat feature. If I click on this, it'll actually open and split the tab. And so I'm in chat here, and I can set the type of context that I want to talk to this. I can also go to ChatGPT itself, but I just want to start with this because I would actually prefer you guys to use this today. So I can't see it because Zoom is in the way. Can you guys see how many characters? Oh, there it is. Okay, so in the more balanced setting, you see how it says 0 to 2000. So I'm not sure if those are characters or if those are tokens. So they're characters. So this is a fairly limited prompt size. Oh, I clicked on the little Bing chat icon in the upper right, and then you can actually size it. So you can make it more or less small. I haven't played with this a whole lot, but I believe that this thing is actually reading from my web page that's open right now. So another nice feature that they have in here is that it will use the web page that you have open to help create its response. So 2000 characters for the balanced response. If I ask it to be more creative, I think it jumps up to 4000. Or if I ask it to be more precise, it goes up to 4000. So these are characters, these aren't tokens. So I would guess that these are on the order of only about 1000 tokens. So the size of the prompt that I can put into this chat is going to be smaller than what I can put into ChatGPT. So I have ChatGPT open here. So I click them both open. I have a paid account. So if you guys just have the free account, you won't see this additional icon. So I can click on 3.5. And I'm going to begin my first prompt. Okay, so I want you to act as a, let's think, data science educator who has deep understanding. It's even auto-completing. Okay, so I just typed in this role that I want it to have. I need to give it now a task. I'm going to hold down the shift key and see if this doesn't. Yeah, I can do a carriage return. So holding down shift and enter, I can carriage return onto a new line. It really doesn't matter if I do this or not, but I like to keep my text a little separate. Let's do this. I'm going to have it do a data science thing, and I apologize for you that are not data scientists. We'll say load the Palmer penguins data set from Python. Actually, let's see. Create a script. Show me the code to load Palmer penguins data set from Python. Need all outputs as Python that can be copied. Okay, so I've now tried to establish that I want it to be a data scientist that understands R and Python. I'm asking for this data set called Palmer's Penguins. This is a training data set, which is both in R and in Python. And then I'm going to ask it to generate its outputs in Python. So I'm now going to run this, send it off. So ChatGPT 3.5 is fast, so it'll generate outputs pretty quickly. So it says, certainly this is how you load it. And notice how it's created this text window that says I can copy the code. So this output is generated from Markdown. Markdown automatically makes this thing look like a Python window. And then it gives me some information about how to load the data set. Yeah, I think it kind of does. So the act as thing, yeah, maybe that's hard coded into the language model. You could probably phrase it a little bit differently, but it's trying to establish the role up front. And it may be that you could even put, I want you to act as a data science educator at the bottom of your prompt, and that wouldn't change the order. Yeah, just trying to set up a structure for how you're creating your prompts. Yep. So I'm going to come back up here. I'm going to copy this text, and then I'm going to paste it into this one. We'll see how it acts differently on the Bing chat side. So the difference now is that Bing chat, so that output that was generated by 3.5 did not use the internet. It just used the trained model. The new Bing chat just went out to the internet, and it went to pypy.org. It went to github.com and this graph gallery. And it generated a slightly different output with different suggestions. But also notice that by accessing the internet, it created citations for itself. And so a lot of people have complained about how ChatGPT hallucinates stuff. I would argue that at this point, it's not hallucinating. It's actually going to websites and getting real content. Okay, so this is, again, all free. Let me switch my version here to 4.0. We'll see how this does. So for those of you that have used ChatGPT 4, it's $20 a month. It's capped. You're only allowed to do 25 messages every 3 hours. That's partly because the model that ChatGPT 4 uses is so large that it can only run on the largest GPUs on the cloud, and these cost a lot of money. And so in a few microseconds, it can generate an output, but when there's 80 million daily users, they're limiting the speed. For myself, I find that I'm not really writing more than 25 prompts an hour. Okay, so similar results as the 3.5 gave us. But again, this new Bing chat has an extra set of features to it. Did anyone else get any interesting results? Did they try their own inputs? Okay, so I'm going to close that for a second so we can see the website again. Okay, so you now have access to these awesome lists. I suggest reading through those to find your favorite things. You can copy, paste, and put these things in if you want to see how they do. But again, just to reiterate, you want to establish a role. You want to give it a task. That task could be anything from writing an essay or an outline, a cover letter, a resume, or code. Okay, and then so some of the output formats. So as I've said, the outputs that are being generated are most likely in this markdown text. You can trick the ChatGPT into actually producing the markdown inside of a code block, which may make it easier to copy paste out of the window. For those of you that are working in things like spreadsheets, it can output things like CSVs. It's not going to output actual files at this point. I don't have access to some of the newest extensions. There's a code interpreter, which will actually generate data and figures inside of it, and you can export those. But right now, just exporting the executable code, or if you're using something like Excel, you can export a formula and put it into your spreadsheet. You can kind of work interactively. Okay, so there was the question about how you can link your prompts. So I've heard this called chain prompting or linked prompting. And so essentially you're setting up the priming of what you're asking it to do. you're getting a set of results. You could then ask it to perhaps summarize the output, or to continue the conversation, slightly tweaking your responses. Okay, so these general prompt traits that I want you to keep in mind. So what are the 5, 6, 7 W's? So, who do you want ChatGPT to be while you're talking to it? What is the specific context of the thing you want to do? If you're interested in a specific time period, maybe you're researching history or sometime on the internet, you can say when. If you're doing something spatially, you could, say what country something happened in, or what type of research area you want it to focus on. And then you can specify how you want to respond. So the syntax, if you want to write code or you want to specify something, you can use and mark down this set of backticks or a triple tick. Let's go to chat here. And so the way I do this is do a new chat. So we'll go to that old chat. Did I kill it? Okay, so I have the ChatGPT history is maintained typically on the left side, and you can go back to your histories. So I'm going to copy this code from my other previous chat. And then in the new chat, I'll say, I want you to act as a Python guru who is salty and sort of mean. So you can, pirate, and has a pirate accent. So I'm now going to add in these 3 ticks. I'm going to do a carriage return, and then 3 more ticks. So these 3 ticks establish that this is going to be a block of code. I'm going to paste in my code. So it doesn't look like it, but by establishing these 3 ticks, and I can probably even do this, I'll say Python. So this is markdown syntax, but I'm telling it that this is a Python code block. Did I misspell accent? Okay, and then we'll say, what does this code? Okay. So it's going to respond in a specific way, hopefully with an accent. And then I've given this code block. All right. So my pirate Python code interpreter. Okay, so it can explain to me what this code does. I think as Greg will show during his section, using ChatGPT to correct your code or to explain to you what your errors are in your code responses has been wildly useful for me. There's a lot of things that I see in my code errors. I don't know what it means. Okay, so you establish a role, you go to context, and you set the type of prompt result that you want it to have. Okay, we're bumping up. Does anyone have any questions so far about how to structure your prompts? Has anyone tried to do this in Bard? So the accessibility of the internet through the Bing chat and through Bard, I think makes those 2 platforms far ahead of even the ChatGPT 4.0. So being able to generate an output that then can send you back to a website, you can actually fact check what it's just produced for you. In the second tab window, go ahead.
This first part of the act as a role, do you normally use this for your day-to-day tasks? Or what?
I do. Every time I set a prompt now, I tell it what I want it to be first. Because if you're giving it a 0-shot prompt, remember, it's like it knows everything about humanity, and you've given it 4 words to say something. So it's going to kind of meander, and it won't exactly result in what you want. You can follow up. So you can keep sending subsequent prompts, and it'll start to narrow its inference into that subject area that you want. A lot of times you'll end up over here, and you actually wanted it over here. So that's when I go back and I'll restart a new prompt session.
Even if it's as simple as write a Python code for this task, you initiated with add the Python.
Yeah. Sometimes it does start to like, I don't know, it loses its precision in its results. If I've given it a whole bunch of other Python code and it keeps generating the wrong set of code, you can respond to it and tell it, no, bad, wrong. And it'll say, oh, I'm so sorry. And it'll try to fix itself. And so you can keep working on it and cranking on it until it gets you to where you need to go. But at some point, you're going to just abandon that prompt string and you're going to go start a new one. So yeah, in my experience, it kind of wears itself out after 10 or 20 subsequent prompts.
Advantages of the sequential prompt versus
I guess so. Some of the advantages of using the chaining or the sequential prompting, I suppose one thing would be the size of the prompts. So I recently wrote a paper and I took sections of the paper and I asked ChatGPT to make it more readable and accessible to people. And so fortunately, it wasn't changing a whole lot of words, but I wasn't able to give it, I didn't want to give it the whole paper because I was afraid that it was going to start moving paragraphs around in the paper. And so I did that section by section. And partly I hoped that it was still going to be generating its subsequent prompts based off of like my introduction to my methods. So it knew that any changes it was making are still going to be related to the priors. I haven't tried to give it really large individual like copy paste prompts. The other way I've used it is what we'll talk about this afternoon is where you can have it read PDFs for you. So there are tools that will read multiple PDFs at a time and synthesize and summarize an output. But remember, the size of the model can only handle a couple thousand tokens. So if you give it 100 PDFs, it's not going to be able to read them all, and it might die, or it wouldn't be able to create a contextual response where it actually used all 100 at the same time. You don't I think in Bing Chat we can. Maybe Greg knows. How do you put a PDF into the chat? So you can insert URLs into the Bing chat and the Bard chat, and it will read the websites. Chat PDF. There are plugins. So these are the base platforms. We'll talk about extensions later. So it's big money right now in the software industry. Everybody's building a plugin. There are a dozen PDF readers. There's a dozen summarizers. There's so many tools. I can't keep up with what's out there and what's good. But you can, I believe, in this Bing chat, import a URL and ask it about the website or ask it about a PDF. And it may read the PDF for you, or you may have, as Heidi said, you may have to go to one of these readers. Okay, so within this Bing chat, they have the chat. They also have this compose feature where you can ask it to write an email or a blog or an essay. And then they have this other insights. So this looks like it's just going to take us some more information. I will say that I was able to, we'll say, I want you to show me a picture of Wilbur Wildcat. So one nice thing about access to the internet is this should show me an image. And I can't do this in ChatGPT right now. Okay, it said that. Now I'm going to say no. There it is. Okay, so it did show me the pictures. So you can start to use this to search for imagery or videos or sounds. Yeah, yep, that's right. So yeah, the question is there a max response length? Yes, the response length is the same as the input. So the amount of output it can generate is the same number of tokens that it can take in.
Sometimes in my work, the thing where I'm doing like cleaning or progressive responses, and sometimes ChatGPT like gets ahead of me and starts doing the task before I'm done giving it context in my different, and because my stuff's so long, it's like a full press release.
Right.
what the tone should be, who the person writing the code should be. Is there any like particular just short command that you give that says like, let's start this task and go?
Yeah, I don't know about, so the question is there a command you can give it so that it doesn't start generating the output that you want? I don't know. I know that if it times out, you can say resume or continue and it will actually finish. Andrew?
I found that you have to like really tell it with every sequential prompt not do the thing you don't want it to do. I don't know if you've tried that, but that's
Okay. We're bumping into our break, so I want to let you guys go and get some food and coffee. Let's plan on coming back at 10:05.
So we will continue. So we will continue with the section of AI in education. So you have, you can go to the workshop agenda and select on education. Greg is talking after me, so I'll give a presentation of using AI, specifically ChatGPT and BART in higher education teaching environments. And there's a presentation I'm going to follow, so you can open it. And so we share. So sorry. Okay, so we have been talking about how things are changing so fast that it's hard to keep track. So we'll start with a little bit of history. So BART and ChatGPT are now part of the educational technologies. And there's no remembrance of what we have been doing in online learning. So we started in '94 with the bulletin board systems, and then '95, the web was going to solve our problems in education. Then we tried computer mediated communications in '96, and then about '97, new learning theories search like constructivism. We started using wikis around '98 and e-learning in '99. And then maybe some of you took some courses about learning objects and help how to design something that can be reusable using for learning purposes. And then around 2002, the appearance of learning management systems came, and now they're everywhere used, LMS systems. We started using blogs around 2003, and then open educational resources were defined around 2005. Web 2.0 was promised for helping education besides videos. And then the whole Second Life wave came. Everyone started opening spaces on Second Life. We started using e-portfolios to grade our students. We started using social media. Then around 2010, connectivism, which appeared around 2005, started being used in learning systems. And we start talking about personal learning environments, and then MOOCs, the massive open online courses, the open textbooks, learning analytics, learning batches around 2015. And then 2016 was the return of AI to education. We started talking about blockchain uses in education. And then suddenly around 2018, it's called the dystopian turn. All our use of social media just gave data to the different companies, and they start using our data, and we just we went into a dark age where all the data was being shared, and it was used for surveillance and to try to make our profiles and make all the advertisements sent to each person. And now we're around 2023, and we're talking about AI and large language models. Okay, so it's a new thing. And what can we do with that? Tyson mentioned that ChatGPT got its first million users in 5 days, around the last year. And then there's a poll made by Educase, and this is the change between February and April 2023. And this is how people in higher education are thinking about using ChatGPT in higher education. So now 67% of the polled persons agree that 67% agree that ChatGPT can be used in higher education. Still, we have 18% neutral and 11% there somewhere. Okay, so now last month or 2 months ago, the Pew Research Center made another poll, and we can see that there's a lot of people who still do not know anything about ChatGPT, and you can separate the polls by ages and also by profiles, and you can still see that only the younger generations are using ChatGPT more than everyone else. And as always in using technology in education, basically the faculty are always having hard time trying to keep up with the students. So that's nothing new. We've been there, so now we're up to a new challenge, how to use AI in education and to increase our professional performance. Okay. So we have been seeing that the changes are very fast, and basically everything that is around today is being called generative AI, means that they're creating contents. And just looking at this year, all the models, the new models have been launched. For example, GPT-4 was launched March 14 this year. BART, March 21, only a week difference. Alpaca was 1 day after GPT-4. And then we have Palm 2 and we have Llama. So these are different large language models being used. So how can we take advantage of this and help improve our learning environments? So when we talk about artificial intelligence, we're talking about systems that are capable of reasoning, learning, and also doing some autonomous actions. And also all the elements of these systems is a natural language processing. So it's trying to mimic our human language. So these systems are capable of doing text classification, summarizations, or machine translation. We have been doing that, so we are familiar with that. And also, they're using language models. And as Tyson mentioned a few minutes back, these systems are not intelligent. These systems are just using probability models of the language. So every language, English, Spanish, French, they have different statistics. So a language model is a probability model of the language. And computational linguistics is focused on trying to mimic systems that can recreate human language. And this is done by using neural networks, which is this is a type of algorithms from deep learning, and they are trained. That means that they have multiple parameters. They need to be tuned, and these type of tuning are used are done by using different types of algorithms. Okay, and the idea is to mimic the human language process. Okay, so the training of the large language models is not an easy task. It takes a couple of months, and it involves different steps, and it uses all sorts of information from the internet. Wikipedia is there, GitHub is there. All the different sites where people create content are used to train these models. And this basic information or data has to be then pre-processed before being used for training a model. So it's a very lengthy process and also expensive because you have to use lots of computational infrastructure. And some trainings may take months, some trainings may take days, and that will be expensive. Okay. So what's the difference between ChatGPT and Google Bard? So ChatGPT is a transformer model and developed by OpenAI. And also the data which was used for training the model was cut up to 2021. While BART is a factual language model, means that it's only using whatever information is stored by Google database or data set, which is called C4. And basically has all the public data from search results and other. And so if we try to integrate these models into higher education, we have to be careful and take into account different ethical issues about data privacy, algorithmic transparency, meaning that we need to know how the algorithms work behind the systems. And also these algorithms may have some bias. Also, now the commodification of education has started. It means that companies are making profit of your information and inside the education system. And also we need to know or take into account that not everyone has access to the same technology. So we need to think about equitable distribution. Okay, so what would be advantages of using ChatGPT or BARD in AI in higher education? So we can try to tailor instruction just using following each student's needs. This is personalized learning. Also, we can have real-time feedback, which is very important for a student to know if his answer or her answer is correct or not. And also we can try to automate things like grading and creating lesson plans. There's disadvantages related to cost, bias, and job displacement. Could lead to job displacement for some teachers, but there's a lack of like 90 million teachers around worldwide that we don't have, so AI systems could improve this. Also, there is a role of the technology in higher ed. So, well, we have seen that. So what would be some advantages of using ChatGPT or BART in higher education? There's several papers you can consult. The references are there. So we can create individualized learning experience, like for assessment, evaluation, adaptive systems, personalization, and intelligent tutor systems. That is a system that we have been longing for a while. We can create flexibility and accessibility in the learning systems. And there's a model there called R2D2, read, reflect, display, and do. Also, we can facilitate active learning and also look for student engagement. So we use different pedagogical strategies like group working or problem solving or hands-on learning, experiential learning. Also, we can enhance the instructor efficiency, creating learning environments that are more active and makes learning more efficient. And also develop critical thinking, which is essential for performing daily life activities, and also help on argumentative writing skills. The disadvantages and limitations of ChatGPT in higher ed would be there's always technical difficulties. Some people are more challenged in technology, and also there's always a learning curve. These systems can lead into misinformation and understanding limitations. So there's always bias, different types of bias, like confirmation, the Dunning-Kruger effect, attribution bias, and group thinking bias. Also, we need to take into account the emotional and social interactions restriction. We know that we spend too much time in technology. We try to avoid face-to-face conversations. And also this has to be taken into account. And also there's a dependence on the infrastructure, which creates this digital divide. We saw that digital divide increase during the pandemic. Okay, so we have to know that these type of models are biased. They fabricate information. They may lead to reasoning errors, and also, they won't respond to everything. We have to train them. And also, these models have a limited amount of information in time. We saw that graph from Tyson. When to use ChatGPT. If you know the answer, then it's safe. If you don't know the answer, then you have to start taking precautions. Okay. All right. So you can use it as a tool, but you cannot depend completely on it. So there's this paper by UNESCO, which was published in March about this topic. Okay, so let's jump into ethics. So what would be some ethical considerations while implementing these type of models? We need to have policy recommendations that include data governance, algorithmic transparency, bias mitigation, digital literacy for the people, and training. Also, we need to ensure that there is privacy protection, trust building, bias identification, mitigation, development of skills, and also we'd like to enhance the learning outcomes and also take into account the ethical issues of AI systems. And there's several papers around these topics. We have a paper by Subov about data privacy and security. We live in a surveillance capitalism. Everyone is watching us. So, and they're taking our data and they're making use of that, commercial use. We have to take into account bias and fairness of AI. And we have to take also into account how to improve the autonomy and authenticity in learning, following the ideas of the connectivism by George Simmons. And the idea is just to help learners choose their own learning goals, also learning is best obtained while you have a variety of learning resources. Also, learning is social and endure, so we need collaboration. And also we have to be connected with the real world problems and promote autonomy and authenticity. So if we're going to implement ChatGPT, we need to implement some policies. These policies just were mentioned in the previous slide. Okay. We can review some papers about policies ensuring responsible and equitable use by Williamson. Also about professional development and training educators. We always need to train educators how to use the latest technology in order to be assimilated and incorporated into the learning environments. Also, we need to integrate AI into our institutional LMS. Okay, what about ethics? The University of Bochum in Germany generated a whole legal document about text generated by chatbots cannot be copyright because they use public information, so you cannot change the license of the original information and make it private. So that's why it should be public. Chatbots can be used as help, but we need as humans to make the larger contribution. So chatbots can only be used for guiding our activities. Chatbots cannot be used to grade exams or use data or text from students without permission. And also the university has to change the regulations to include the use of chatbots. So that's some German experience. Okay, so at the end, the integration of AI, large language models, need to be carefully considered. So you have to take into account pedagogical theories, the societal implications, the ethical considerations, and make new policies. Okay, and then you have more ChatGPT references. For example, large language models cannot write using reflection. Also, there's a link there for how to create ideas for AI in education. And also GPT detectors are biased. So if you're trying to use some ChatGPT detector on some student writing, there's always a way of cheating the detectors. And also they are biased because the language models are based on some text corpus or vocabularies, and not everyone has the same vocabulary, especially if you're not a native English speaker. Okay, so you can find more information about using ChatGPT and BART in higher education. And also you can find more about prompt engineering. And there is a AI tool landscape you can use. For example, you have all the general AI models, and if you're doing research, you will find a list of different AI research assistants, because if you ask any of the large language models for a topic or selection, it will come back with some references, and not most, but there's a small percentage of these references which are just made up. If you try to search them, you won't be able to finding. So you have to work the other way around. You can ask these type of systems for some type of text, and then it will come back with a set of papers. So So that would be my presentation.
So Carlos, is this presentation going to be up permanently?
Yes,
Can you?
I'll link it to the web.
Okay, I was gonna ask that. Yeah.
yeah, it's in the agenda.
It's not in there right now. Carlos just revealed this for the first time. So I'll
It's-
get
it's
the
a-
links from Carlos and we'll put them into the website.
It's over here.
Carlos, thank you. Could you just tell us again, how is it biased against non-native speakers? Could you say that again?
Well, I'm a non-native speaker. My vocabulary is less than a native speaker. So when I write, I won't use very sophisticated language. My language complexity is lower than some native speaker. So when you use a ChatGPT detector, you're trying to detect if it was written by a human or a machine. But if my vocabulary is restricted, I will look like a machine.
So you'll look like a machine because you're not native.
So yeah, so it's bias against us.
Okay.
You're going to answer?
No, I want to ask about the ethical implication of the tools being trained on our data just that exists on the internet that we didn't ever acknowledge or opt in for, such as fan fiction that we've written or reviews on Amazon that we've written or even our tweets, and how all of this information is now, used to train these models and what that means.
I'm trying to find out. No, basically the information is just links, what people have written in GitHub, what people have written in Wikipedia.
Not everything is licensed.
Yeah.
Not everything that it was trained on was licensed publicly. That's.
Wikipedia is public, GitHub is public.
All of the information that a GPT was trained on is not.
It's public,
It's unlawful.
it's public.
Yeah, so right. So I think my partner has always told me that if something is free, then you are the product. And so you have been using these platforms for years for free. They've been gathering your information, and Carlos pointed that out.
Yeah, I'm trying to find.
Not ethical, but it's also not illegal.
That wasn't necessarily Creative Commons licensed or any kind of license. It was just because it's on the internet doesn't make it free for businesses to train their models with.
Yeah,
When you
and
get the I agree button when you sign up for an account somewhere, how many of you have actually up to that all this stuff? Here, maybe, right? And so that's where the fine print probably says, we're gonna publish your data, we're gonna use this stuff in some ways.
there's currently, and this is in our ethics section on the website already, but there's a proposed act in the EU to limit AI's use of our data. And the EU has the General Data Protection Act, which already protects EU citizens. Our country does not have that yet.
Then it's going to think in reverse.
That's-
not retrospective saying, okay, now we don't want you to untrain your model.
Those are the data that is being used to train the models. So you have, they're just visiting all the internet, which is open. The C4 is a database from Google.
Right.
They
so
weren't, and they
something
shouldn't
to
have
be
been.
Said about that is like
There's
the
also a
books,
lawsuit.
4.5%, that can actually be like Google books. When you
Google
can
Books.
Search a Google book and that text comes up. As an author, I did not consent to having my book available.
In Google Doc?
Google does that so that you can buy a preview of it. And so that's not necessarily.
Wait. The books are owned by some publisher. The publisher having some agreement with Google in order to digitize.
Oh, absolutely. But did an author opt in to?
You're getting paid as an author. You
Problem with what we paid in, whether or not we actually were.
you
consenting
give
and
away all your rights to the publisher when you
Let
publish a
us
book.
continue the ethical discussion at lunch.
Okay,
So thank you, Carlos. We're gonna pivot. Greg is gonna pick back up the hands-on stuff. and we're gonna do some daily productivity stuff. We bled into our break pretty far, so I'm gonna take us until about 11:15, and then we'll try to break for lunch. You guys are welcome to hang out in here for lunch. We will continue the ethical discussion. But yeah, let's keep moving.
I'm Greg. I'm mostly wanting to focus on really like use cases. So I'm going to be asking a lot about what you're wanting to use ChatGPT for, especially regarding things like your everyday life or productivity. So like for me, so I have ADHD, so productivity was like really high on my list of I need to be more productive. I need to be able to manage my time better. So these tools are really great, like personal planners or, like helping write a challenging email that I'm stuck on or something. So I think really first what I want to get from you is just some use cases. So like a little more about, for me anyway, why you're here, right? So who has a few use cases for me?
So I code almost every day, and it's faster sometimes to ask the chat what to do instead of checking 10 tabs of Stack Overflow. So that's one of my regulars.
Yeah, so I think we'll get into coding specifically later, but that's one of my biggest use cases as well, right? So like I went through the experiment of, all right, let me just try to develop a full like web app with very little knowledge of how it would work. Just want to see what the limitations are. So there are limitations, right? So no matter what you're doing, especially with coding, you really have to know what the code's doing. You have to have an understanding of it to actually be able to, dive in and say, oh yeah, I think that's working. Or, it can only troubleshoot itself so much. Great. What other use cases do we have? You have one?
So as a researcher, I'm always committed to update my references and read a lot of up-to-date research. So I'm spending a significant amount of time, as each of us, I believe, reading. And very often happens that that article or a chapter specific one is not necessarily what I was searching for. So I found out very useful ChatGPT to make a summary about selections of articles, which maybe I pre-selected already, and to focus on specific to read better or more. And actually I tested and it worked very, very good. I'm really satisfied about that. So I'm really enhancing my productivity through ChatGPT. Yeah, that's one of the examples.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think Tyson tried to throw me under the bus with knowing how to upload PDFs. So you can do it sometimes with like the actual URL, as long as it can download and get into there. But the extensions themselves can, oh, you already have mic. The extensions that we'll discuss perhaps at some point can also do this for you.
Yeah, so I've used it for, like I said, like learning how to code more, like explaining things, like kind of how I did in the first example of how I would do all that. But I've also used it for, or tried to use it for like writing. So I just like started up a meetup group recently, and like I'm not great at writing, so I'm like, help me write a description for this meetup group. And it actually prompted me after I gave it a very simple one. It's like, okay, give me this, and this. And then I gave the model like all that information, and then it wrote out the thing, and I just edited that. So I think it's really good for helping me write.
Yeah, that definitely gets into, I don't have the use case on the website, but seeing how there's folks here that are interested in business applications. So my wife has a small business, and she really hates social media, like to the core. Like it's immoral. I hate it. So I taught her how to use ChatGPT through like a series of prompts to be able to generate social media posts. So it's a similar concept to where it'll prompt her, be like, well, I didn't get enough information. Can you tell me a little bit more? So it's nice how there's that kind of back and forth. There are extensions now, like one's called like Prompt Perfect, where you add a prompt in and it'll spit out like, I guess, a more optimized version of that prompt. So, I mean, this stuff is rapidly evolving. So I think you'll see that you'll have to input less and less for it to be giving you more and more. But very cool. Thank you.
I've actually used it for my gym routine. So I'm trying to be more fit, more physically fit, lead a healthier lifestyle. And one of the things that I'm not too sure about is how to optimize muscle growth with like whatever, like if it's chest day, if it's arm day, if it's leg day. I asked ChatGPT what are the best workouts for muscular hypertrophy, which is just muscle growth. So I've asked it that, and it gave me a lot of exercises that I was already doing. So that's good that I've done the research ahead of time, and I was able to kind of like cross-refer and make sure that's the best way to go. So I've used it to optimize my gym routine.
Yeah, that's cool. So I'm really good friends with one of the gym owners in town and with their trainers. So they really struggle with kind of what you're doing for yourself. But if they're training someone, they have, like certain characteristics of that person. It takes them a lot of time to come up with that routine. It's what big part of what you're paying for. So ChatGPT has been shown that you can like input in data, and it's highly effective of giving you these like personalized routines or nutrition, anything like that. It's at least a very good starting point, and you don't have to pay a personal trainer or nutritionist, so it's you're saving money.
So yeah, I have a very different kind of examples. So I've previously worked on DNA and protein language models. So I've used DNA language models to, let's say that if you change a base at some location, how's the gene expression gonna look like? Or can you design new repressors or regulators for a gene? Or for protein, you can use protein language models to say that, can you design a better sequence for the same structure or come up with a new structure, like what AlphaFold is doing? And then there is ESM fold, which is based on language modeling to produce the structures. So that are some use cases which are very different from what we are learning today.
Yeah, it's cool to see how the use cases can be, much more kind of like in the general, everyone could have some use of it. But then you're seeing that these like research specialist applications too are becoming really, popular. I mean, I'm not going to talk too much about the large language model that found all of the really dangerous chemicals and all that. But on the other side of it, it found pretty much every possible protein structure. So stuff like that, it's really things that we couldn't have been able to do. And, we're talking like a snap of the fingers.
I haven't used it for this yet, but I have this problem where graduate students need to ask a faculty member to serve on their dissertation committee, and they start an email and they put it in their drafts folder and they just won't send it. And I realized that if they could just ask ChatGPT to write it, it would probably say what they want to say, but they'd feel more confident about sending it. So I think I may use it for that. But the other one is I asked it once what all the neuroimaging tasks were for grief, which is something I study. And it hallucinated a bunch of tasks that I realized were really good.
Yeah, the hallucinations are funny. I really tried to get it to give me like a list of references, and it hallucinated every one of them. And I'm like, I guess that was too specific. But now you have like the ability to web browse. So you can say like, go on Google Scholar and find the top 10 or whatever most cited, and it'll just like, which is super cool.
I use it sometimes for paraphrasing. I mean, I'm not a native English speaker, and sometimes I know what I want to say, but I don't get the right nice sentence. So I just put in my own words what I want to say, and it comes like magic with a beautiful sentence.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's like the other side of like, there's that bias there, but it can also be used to help you with, any struggling with language that you might have. So when I started scientific writing, I wrote something and submitted it as, like a paper for a conference. And my PI got an email from a colleague and was like, yeah, I'm just checking, is English his second language? Or I'm like, yeah, obviously. So I'm like, man, I really wish I had ChatGPT, like 5 years ago when I really needed to learn how to write. I'm better now, I promise. But yeah, it's a true story.
I build new online programs for the College of Medicine. And so I put in job skills from Indeed with course learning outcomes and program learning outcomes, and I have it cross-referenced to tell me where the gaps are in our curriculum.
Wow, we're getting pretty sophisticated. That's pretty cool. I wouldn't have thought of that one. I'm very much in the like, can you write my boss an email that I don't want to write? Or she's not in the room, so.
Riffing back to the idea of accents, my students always say to me, "You've got a wonderful accent." I say to them, "It's not an accent, it's a language, it's English." Anyway, so I appreciate that. One of the things that we do when we're teaching is we have to expand our student credit hours in various courses. So some good faculty end up teaching rather large sections, or they teach multiple sections. And so I think having a way to transfer courses online through use of AI approaches would be very useful. And the other thing would be to automate the grading system. So I take an issue with the previous talk in which they say that AI cannot grade or should not grade. We get graduate students and we get undergraduates to grade. And I worry about that because keeping the quality control high in that case is perhaps more difficult than using AI. So there's a couple of thoughts there.
Yeah, I think it depends on the grading task. Like if it's something like it's reading through a set of predetermined answers and there's only like a certain set that are possible, and it's just cross-referencing those, like, then yes, a machine can go through that much more efficiently. It gets trickier, and this is also true with, I saw the example of like taxes. So like ChatGPT can give you pretty much any tax question you want, but it's not going to get rid of like tax accountants, because they bring in the knowledge of like, well, each individual has certain like characteristics or certain things about them that need to be considered as well, and that can help massage the tax code. So it's similar with like short and longer answers, right? So there's context that the language models can't really pick up yet, so that's where it becomes a little more murky.
Can I be the last one?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I've heard about how doctors are using it to write claims for their clients on their insurance. So insurance companies are already using AI to reject claims. The doctors have to write a valid justification to get their client access to the care. So they can now use the AI to write these justifications. It's saving the doctors hours per week. Okay.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm really excited that all of you have actually quite diverse use cases. So the ones that the reason why I want to go over yours first, the ones that I did were actually produced by ChatGPT, so they're much more generic. So that was one of my use cases. I've actually used it a lot to develop outlines for curriculum. So if it's, I have maybe less than a week to come up with a 2-hour lesson or something, I'm like, okay, give me a 2-hour lesson in an outline, and it produces that. You can go into each step, like, okay, give me the outline now for section 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. It saved me, like rules of time, right? Because you're on a really rapid schedule and you're not really able to come up with thorough pedagogy. It's able to do that for you, at least that first step, and then you add your personal flavor. So that's my use case anyway, what I mostly used it for, besides helping my wife with social media posts. So on the page, I have a lot of examples are more related to, I guess, things like personal planning or content creation. We have like personal assistant tasks. So you can go through them because I think they're still neat. These prompts are actually produced also by ChatGPT. I'm just going to keep disclosing that. I didn't cite it at the bottom, so I'll get there. But for things like personal planning, this can be things like planning out your day. Like maybe you have a schedule thing. You can say something like, "Hey, I need you to help plan my day tomorrow." Oh, you know what? So it lists all the scheduled meetings and deadlines from my calendar, take into account a couple hours of break, and suggest a nice time managed itinerary, then prioritize the tasks and give me a task list that I should tackle. Right. So that's really important, especially you get into a lot of administrative tasks, or, like I've had full days of meetings that I'm just looking at. I'm like, I have maybe like 5 minutes to eat lunch or something. Can I just like manage this a little bit better? Can I figure out where I have pockets of time? Yeah.
So how is the chat going to read your calendar?
So that is the when I think I get into the calendar, that's a limitation. So Bing's AI can directly link into like your Outlook. So the Outlook calendar is integrated in that. Bard is going to be able to integrate with your Google Calendar.
Right now, today, if I from the bar and I have my Gmail calendar, it can read it.
Yes. So Google, I don't know if they formally released the full suite of integrations, but they will if they haven't. Microsoft is doing the same thing where it's going to be integrated in its 365. So it includes Outlook. So yeah, you'll be able to literally go like, all right, well, plan a meeting between like these set of people, because you can look at everyone's availability on like a time slot that you're trying to, get a meeting set up for. You can tell it, it'll just do that for me, and it can help find that. So I had a difficult time scheduling my graduate committee meetings. I had 4 committee members, and I think I ended up having like one very small slot of time that took me 2 weeks to get with several polls, and they weren't integrated into Microsoft, so I couldn't just, cheat. So in that case, it would have been really nice if I could have just had integration of Google, which they all were in. But yeah, so as of now, you should be able to, well, you will soon be able to integrate your calendar with any of these. But the standard GPT, of course, it doesn't have access. Standard Bard, unless you give it access, it isn't there yet. But that's a good question. Yeah, so I have these prompts here. You can feel free to try them out. I didn't produce the actual, generative answer to it because I used GPT-4, so it's the paid version. So it would have given me a slightly different version of GPT 3.5. I'm also interested in knowing what type of personal planning tasks that you all struggle with. So think of like mundane things that, might just need to be cut off your plate. You're writing an email, you're doing some type of planning. So what kind of use cases related to planning out a day or time management would be useful to you? And then I can actually go into ChatGPT and we can see what it produces. Yes.
Personal planning.
Yeah, so anything related to that general task, like a mundane component of your life that you would like automated or fixed in some way. Okay. It's okay. So you can integrate them now with each other? So it's really painful apparently, but you can integrate your calendars in with each other, and then, like Bard can work with your Microsoft calendar, and then probably vice versa as well.
So we're not kidding. We just thought, would it be possible to like have an AI plan your meals for the next 2 weeks by giving it like the Target website and being like $100 per week for the next 2 weeks? What are we going to cook?
Yeah, so you have to give it more information than, some of the usual prompts, but yes, I mean, of course it can. So there are especially some of the extensions that can read websites. It's like read URL, and it'll like actually read what's on that website. And then any of the ones that have browsing extensions can go on that website, summarize it up. So that would do the step of, like nutrition that you need to have. So you're going to need to block out like what your macronutrients need to look like, micronutrients based off of any information it gives you. And then from there, you could, I guess, hypothetically give it information about like local grocery costs. So then it could optimize that. You could also do that like if you have a list of different items and costs, like you just have this blanket list of things you want to have in your diet. It's like a CSV, you could upload that into GPT and then have it figure out like what's the most optimized way to do that. So yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible, right? That's a really good use case actually.
Greg, I think part of these questions are getting towards the auto GPT stuff. So these are all extensions, and there are now a million startups that are thinking of every idea we can possibly conceive of on how to build these applications. Do you want to maybe talk about what auto GPT is briefly?
Yeah, so I can briefly touch on it. So auto GPT I mean, the idea is it's autonomously doing a bunch of the steps like with like linking different prompts together. So you can accomplish a similar thing by saying, all right, well, here's my first prompt, here's the answer, next prompt, here's the answer, adding another prompt, give me the answer. AutoGPT takes it to a step that's, here's my big prompt, here are a set of up to 5 goals that I want you to accomplish with this prompt. Go do it, right? And it has access to web browsing, it has access to a lot of information that way. So it'll come up with a plan, tell you, here's what I want to do. Do you agree? Yeah, okay, go with it. It'll go through a step, find an answer, ask if the next step that it's going to say is okay. And it keeps going through that process until it's accomplished all of its goals and all of its tasks, right? So the idea is that you don't have to think about, like kind of the back and forth that you would get with the actual generative AI itself, which is great because it's going to be producing ideas and prompts that are optimized for itself. Yeah, we have a question.
I've seen videos where it has like access to your computer and it can download things and stuff like that. So I was just curious, like, what were some of the risks associated with using something?
Yeah, so there are certainly risks. So it can edit things on your computer, right? I don't think it has pseudo privileges, so it couldn't just like erase your entire operating system. But so there are risks that you can tell it to go fully autonomous where you're not giving it any feedback at all. And even the creators of AutoGPT are like, don't do that, because it could do something destructive and you're not telling it anything otherwise, you're just giving it some prompts. So yeah, I mean, it could, some of the limitations, I guess, that I've seen, or some of the risks is you're using your API that's plugged into ChatGPT, so and that costs money. So if you tell it just keep running, it can loop on itself forever. So, that's eating money very fast. I tried a 3-goal prompt, and it just kept looping back and forth to the same thing. So these things don't have memory. They don't have the ability to recognize what they've done before for the sake, like meaning this didn't work, so let's not go towards that again. I had to physically say, all right, just stop. Don't go to that website ever again, because it kept creating a website that didn't exist. So a lot of risks are going to be with eating money away with the API. And then there are certainly prompts out there that could do destructive things to your computer. But the idea generally is that everything that's produced by it is inside of one folder. So it's not supposed to remove anything. It's supposed to just really create. Yeah.
So what about the use case of, say, I am a researcher and I've been collecting tons and tons of PDFs on my topic, and I have a factoid in my brain and I'm not sure which PDF it came from. So I write something down. I know I've read it in one of these 100 PDFs. Can it go through like my Zotero or Mendeley and say, oh, here's where that came from, or here's one that'll like show that better?
You
I don't
just
know that.
volunteered to stay till after lunch. So there's a paper QA platform on Hugging Face that can do exactly that. And I believe it integrates with your Zotero or one of your reference managers.
Yeah, that's one of the use cases. Again, so I'm not really in research anymore. I'm like, man, I was not in research at the right time, because I could have summarized all these papers. I could have not written my dissertation, all of the things that you're not supposed to do. But yeah, I'll be interested to stay and see how that use case plays out. But thank you. So I can move on. I'll talk about content creation. So this is where for me, this is one of the more powerful components of ChatGPT. So it's trained on a lot of things like fantasy novels and literature and fiction. So it is quite good at producing fiction and producing content, right? So I can actually show a use case. I'm going to just do like a general what my wife would do for a social media post, right? So for like small businesses, if you don't have a marketing team, if you don't have a lot of money, and it's just my wife producing a product. social media is really the biggest way that you can market and integrate with your community, right? And especially if you have identified a very specific community, there's really no way of interacting with them unless they're just literally in town and you can just go to meetings and stuff. So for reference, my wife makes Disney ears, like what you wear to go to Disneyland, but she puts them on noise canceling headphones for folks that have sensory processing disorders, or if you just want to wear your headphones and you want to have them on. So it's all about inclusivity. And it's relevant because you can feed that in to GPT, give it some reference. So like, I always like to name them. So let's say like, you are mouse GPT. You produce social media posts for a product, Disney mouse ears, and noise canceling headphones. Give me 3 social media marketing for marketing. And let's see if it produces. Yeah, and it's cool. It uses emojis and all of the fun things and hashtags. So, all the stuff that, you want to learn how to do, and you're like always told, well, you need to integrate all these hashtags to get into these communities. You need to use all these cool emojis. Well, I'm like, yeah, but I don't care. So it can't produce photos, even if you like read into it. So it can't generate anything, but you can have it look at a photo. So you can use images as part of your prompt. So for like my wife will make themed ones. So if it's like for Tangled or something, she wants to do Rapunzel, she shows the image and be like, this is what it is. And it will describe it as well. Yeah.
And we'll be using Midjourney at lunch. So you can generate images and then give the URL and then it can feed from that.
Okay, this is a little bit of going to that alley. This is more of a sideway, so everyone forgive me and a little. So have you seen the by Balenciaga videos?
Yeah.
So that's fully AI stuff. Someone asked ChatGPT to create a script, then you send that script to Midjourney, then you get the pictures and then you edit them automatically. So it can go nuts in a second.
We will show the Balenciaga videos and the Wes Anderson Lord of the Rings videos at lunch.
So one of the other things, so I've had, so I built my wife's website and we've used different like art pieces that we've produced on Midjourney. One thing that you can do towards this content generation is you can actually tell it, give me like a DALL-E prompt or something. So DALL-E 2 is the image generating, I guess, OpenAI essentially application. So ChatGPT is not yet able to produce images, but it can produce prompts that can produce images. So kind of this like very meta. But the idea is that it's creating kind of optimized prompts. So it's going towards this like perfect prompt generation. So I probably won't get into that because it could take a while for DALL-E to actually produce the image. So, I don't want a spinning wheel. But it is possible to say, like for post 1, give me a DALL-E prompt that is representative of the product or something like that. And go,
Come back and
so the question was, Auto GPT can take So basically the question is, Auto GPT can kind of pipe together different prompts and produce like the whole package, right? Like the posts and the images and stuff. Is that what you're? I don't think it can produce images because it's based off of, it's using ChatGPT 4. So it doesn't have a image generating. Yes, so it can produce all of the information instead of saying like, give me the post, give me the image prompt or whatever. So you can tell it like 3 goals and maybe just 2 of them are, give me 3 posts, give me a image prompt for DALL-E 2 that's representative of each of them. So it can produce all of that in one full swoop, basically. Does that answer?
I was talking more like piping. You know, you could ask it to produce the prompt and pipe it to DALL-E, get that image, create a new allocation to complete.
Okay, so you're saying you produce the image and then now you're using that image inside a new prompt. Yes, it can do that.
But all of that automated without.
Oh, so it can't produce, okay, so with some of the outputs, you can add a new goal. So you would have to still go in and add information yourself, right? So it can't just like, because it would have to be able to launch and run DALL-E 2, which would require your access, so like actually signing in. So anything that actually deals with like your user or anything like that, it can't just like get into that. I haven't done it and I don't know. I don't think so, but I'm not 100% certain on that. That's something that I can look into once we're done, because that's a really good question. Yeah, that'd be really cool.
A question, I can talk now. I have a question that you addressed at lunch or whenever we did the
Mid-journey, yeah.
I'm really interested in ethical questions of how the art in the world is being used. So if we can address that, like where, like there was a list of places where ChatGPT gets their information. Where is Midjourney and DALL-E getting their information? And that's a real question that artists.
And not to forget that text can be art too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the simple answer is they're still really struggling with this known, that they're copyright infringing all the time, right? I mean, like there's been like Shutterstock images that you can see blurred out. Obviously, it's a copyright violation, right? So the short answer is you are certainly getting images based off of copyright infringed art. And that's just like, that's where we're at this point, right? And it gets into, I think there's a type of bias related to like, just kind of like the damn all, produce for producing sake, where instead of going through and making sure, taking a little bit longer perhaps to get an adequate amount of, like Creative Commons images, it's a lot of just like all the internet, just whatever you can crawl. Because the problem is that you have a lot of images and a lot of copyright infringed, art that is out there posing almost as like, yeah, it's for the world or whatever. But clearly it's, people aren't going through the trillions and trillions of images and saying, oh, but is that actually like real or not? So what we would need is an actual ability, like an actual AI to go through even like, hey, like this is like the database of art that we can find. To what extent is this violating copyrights? But yeah, I mean, ethically, I definitely am much more concerned when I generate art. I'm still concerned when I generate text, but I try to make it I don't feed it data, and I try to not ask it to give me anything that hopefully is infringing. I mean, it's probably giving me stuff based off of social media posts, but yeah, so the answer is it's murky, and I wish we could do more about it besides push for them to do better.
There should be an AI solution to the AI problem of art generation. In my other life, on weekends and evenings, I run a small publishing company, and the issue in publishing right now is all about covers. It's not even so much about generated books or novels, it's about the art, and it's really scary. I mean, it's like the idea of feeling art is in that creativity is really problematic.
So Greg, I just want to add one thing to it. What the crawlers have to do is respect robots.txt, which is a requirement for any well-known search crawler. And so there are now RFCs, as in call for comments, on what do you put in as meta tags so that it's not used for different purposes. And so because most of these things ignore the license, such as written as plain text. So by including that in the header of the content and the website, it'll prevent this. Now, Google claims that they've honored all the robots.txt when it crawls, but that's, nobody knows how true that is. OpenAI has like violated it big time. And so I'm guessing sooner or later they'll have a price to pay for it, but they have enough kitty to throw money at it and not worry about it.
Yeah, so we're pretty much at lunch. I mostly didn't get through a lot of the daily productivity examples, largely because you can look at them on the website. So these are just ones to kind of get the motor running. But really, I think like the best data set for different use cases is all of you, right? So that's why we went over quite extensively in the beginning. And I'm glad that all of you participated. So let's hit lunch. You know, I'm here to chat. We can go over some use cases.
Okay, so 11:20 now. Come back at noon. If you would like to go upstairs and grab free food, you're welcome to. If you want to go wander away and buy some food and come back, you're welcome to. If you'd like to go home or go back to your offices and continue working with your new skills, you're welcome to do that. So thank you all for this first section, and we'll see you in about 40 minutes.
So this is sort of the afternoon session. I guess there's supposed to be two parts to this, but I don't necessarily think about them completely differently. So I'm going to actually sort of merge these two together, and we'll see how long we take and how far we get. But basically, so if you're sticking around here, I assume that you're interested in using these types of tools to aid in your research, or just to make, to continue that productivity in your day-to-day work. So just out of curiosity, could some people shout out like what domains they're working in and trying to use for research, or like what types of data you're working with? Genetics data? Neuroimaging, okay. What was this? Disease data, okay. So I'm seeing a lot of like biomedical type leaning. My background is hydrology and earth systems. So no doubt our data is different, but I think we can classify it into a few different things. I think a lot of maybe genetics can be more similar to text data. Neuroimaging has the word image in it. So, so that kind of has an alignment with maybe like satellite data or photography. And so there are all of these different ways that we have to try and work with our data. And they're not all text data. And so there's a lot of questions out there about like, how can you use these types of technologies without necessarily like going into the weeds and developing your own model. So I'd like to highlight a few of those types of things. How many people have like tried to use ChatGPT or Bard or something to like summarize papers or to find out information about your field? And okay, so we've got hands up. Oh, well, keep your hands up. How many of you are happy with the answers that you got? Okay. I see some like 50-50s on it. And yeah, that's kind of how I find it too. Like I feel like I see like it's good at giving these like high level answers, but yeah, go ahead. Yeah, very good point. Yeah, the paid version of ChatGPT is much better, but I still find, like a lot of people end up, Googling them or ChatGPTing themselves. And it's definitely not good at like things like getting those small facts right. So I think that's why there's some of this discrepancy between what you expect to get and what you actually get with these large language models. So to kind of get there, I'd like to highlight a few things that you can actually do along the way. And I'm going to actually flip the script a little bit. I'm going to talk about the OpenAI API and Hugging Face first. because I think that's a slightly flashier demo to start with. Okay, so imagine, for instance, your research involves developing role-playing games around this set of prompts. So I set up ChatGPT. I want to start with this one. So I set up 2 ChatGPT conversations, and I'm letting them talk to each other, sort of. It's sort of manual, but so I set it up with my prompt. I want you to role play the following scenario with me. You will be Bonk and I will be Boop. The format of the role play will be scenario, my prompt, and your response. Please only respond with your response. So that's my prompt engineering setup. I tell it what I want to do. This is what we learned about this morning. And so the scenario is I tell ChatGPT, your name is Bonk. You are a thief trying to steal Jeff Bezos's jewels, and you are working alongside Boop, who is me, who is your hacker backup. I'm working to open the front gate so you can sneak your way through the hedge driveway. And so I say, my starting point is I just say, okay, I've disabled the cameras, blah, blah, blah. It has its response here. Okay, so if I want these agents to sort of talk to each other, but I don't want to really be them, you can imagine you could go, oops, wrong direction. You could go back, and I set up the same sort of prompt, but now you'll note that this one, this agent's name is Boop, and so they're going to talk to each other. So I set it in the same sort of format. Note here, the response that it gave back was, all right, Boop, good work disabling the cameras. This is what I set its initial prompt to be. So this is all rather manual, but you can imagine a world where you would want these things to iteratively interact with each other in a way that doesn't require much intervention. And I think in research, a lot of our jobs is, coming up with an idea and then finding a way to automate it over a lot of data. And so this is where the OpenAI API comes in, because you can go back and forth with this. I made it about that far, and it took me like 15 minutes to go back and forth, copying and pasting. But this was kind of a fun thing to do. But wouldn't it be more fun if we could generate sort of an app that would like do this for us so that these things could talk to each other? So this is where an API will come in handy. So you can't just go to ChatGPT directly. You have to go to the OpenAI platform itself. So what you can do is you can just search OpenAI API key, and this will bring you to a web page that they have where you can basically just create these keys. These are, once you create it, you are allowed to copy it once, basically. So I'll make this a little bigger again. So I've got a few here. I've got these all. So I can create a new one that I'll just call workshop, and I'll create this. And you'll note that it pops up and it says, you won't be able to view this again. So the reason for this is because they don't want you kind of sharing it out, because this will eventually be connected to your billing account. They give you some amount of free quota at the beginning. I think it's $20. Yeah, it's $20 and it lasts a month. So you can play around with it. And you can copy this and put it into different apps that will ask for it. Good.
So this is great. Those of you that don't want to create an account right now, I'm going to create an API key and put it into the HackMD.
Perfect.
And you guys are going to run up my credit card bill. That's okay, because there's also settings in here that I've set that I can't go over $20 a month. So go to the HackMD page, the very bottom, and stand by for a pirated API key.
Beautiful. So I'm just done with this one. I'm actually gonna throw it away right away because I didn't copy it and I don't know what it is. So I am going to revoke this, and this is something that you can do if you ever have a workshop like this and create your API key and share it out. Let the room use it for the day and then throw it away at the end of the day. So it's actually a pretty slick interface with that regard. It's fairly easy to use. And so this brings us to the next, so we've got like a motivation. We want to be able to like build stuff off of the ChatGPT interface, or use things that other people have built. And so this is where Hugging Face comes in. So as Tyson mentioned, Hugging Face is kind of a big deal at this point. It's sort of a community platform around all of this AI and machine learning stuff. So if you go to just huggingface.co, their website, you'll see that they have all sorts of stuff up at the top. You can get pre-trained models. So things, you can't get like ChatGPT's underlying model, but you can get other language models that do similar things and be able to run them on your own. The ability to actually run this stuff varies pretty drastically. Some stuff you need pretty hardcore computing capabilities for, but some things you can run just in your browser. And so we'll look at a little bit of the stuff you can do in your browser. But before that, I'd just like to note, there's also, if you want to sort of delve in and start learning how to develop your own models, it's best to start with sort of a pre-cleaned data set, because getting things to work on your data is much harder than basically anything else in machine learning. They also have basically compute environments and things that you can spin up on your own. I should also note for every domain, I think, is starting to get their own sort of spin-off of this. So I don't know about like genetics or biomedical stuff, but in the earth science field, there's now Radiant Earth, which is like a similar thing to this, but very specific towards earth science. So you might check that out if you're trying to find sort of your community's post for this type of stuff. So Tyson, did you get a, okay. So if you just go to models, you can, you'll be met with a lot of jargon that's completely incomprehensible on the right side. But these are all models that different people have uploaded, and you can see which ones have been downloaded and loaded a bunch of times. So a lot of these are super popular. So like this DinoVit, 105 million downloads. This is some sort of a vision model. But you wouldn't necessarily need to know how to decode that, because on the left side, they sort of have all of these tasks, and they have other ways that you can filter it down. So maybe if you were working with like HIPAA compliant data, you would need to come in here and find something that a license would fit for you. So this is a great way to find what you're allowed to use or able to use. So just for the sake of demos, you can actually go in and look at all of these different models. And I'm going to go to image classification just to demo one thing before we need the OpenAI API. A lot of these models, it's pretty fun to just go in and explore here. A lot of these models have what they call hosted inference, which means Hugging Face has basically propped up the model on their end because they think it's a valuable model for you to be able to try out without downloading anything. So here, this is called ResNet 50, and this was image classification. This is sort of like a classic machine learning model that basically will take an image and tell you what's in that image. So just whenever you see this on the right-hand side, this hosted inference, you can actually play with the model right here. So it says drag image or select from your device. So I'll do that. I'm going to pick this image of my dog wearing a backpack looking sad. So it will actually go in and try and classify this image, and it says German short-haired pointer. We get that a lot, that she's actually a lab healer mix, but not bad. About as good as people on the street. So it did not say sad though, which is unfortunate. So you can go in and play with this and start seeing if it works for your type of data. And you can do this for the other types of models as well. But one thing that I think a lot of people are really interested in these types of technologies for is understanding literature, doing literature review, things like that. So there's one that I think we like to point people to, and actually I'll find it in here. It's called Paper QA. And this is, I should say, this is like a rapidly evolving world. So this probably isn't state of the art anymore, and probably whatever is now won't be in a week. But this is a nice one. It's right here. If you search in the top, make this bigger still, WITED Paper QA. And this also has something like a web interface. So this is document question and answer. And lets you basically use OpenAI's GPT models to analyze documents. So it can analyze PDFs, Word documents, things like that. And so this is where we need that API key, and it kind of walks you through this. It says, this will cost you money, so please be careful. But Tyson has been generous enough to give you all his money. So upload as many documents as you want. So the thing you have to do is enter your API key, and they make this pretty easy. And I now am realizing I copied something else, so I need to create a new API key. Oh, yeah. So I talk about meta-analysis, and what was the other question?
Real world evidence synthesis models that are used in patient reported outcomes and in clinical trials. For example.
I cannot, but would you like to share some information about that?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, there are papers where they say that certain drug, let's say, is very effective, and they have collected clinical trials data with a certain p-value, and you have like range of papers associated with that. And then what you want to do is basically do a real world synthesis to see what is the summarized outcome out of this, to sort of go ahead and decide what are the market potentials of the drug and so forth. So are there any models that have been developed for that kind of, which I mean, this field has been there for a long time, but are there models that use that?
So this Paper QA sort of starts to get at that. It's not specially designed for that. I can't say any specifics, but I think Nirav. Okay.
All three of those are meant for, I think all three of them are on Hugging Face.
Okay, so Nirav's saying that there's PubMed GPT. Andrew's just found it. Looks like on the web.
And then there's a Biomed GPT, and then there's like just Med GPT.
Okay, so steal that API key of mine and let's see what happens.
Yeah, so so I guess, thank you, Nirav. And this is where my my sort of medical and bio knowledge is out the window. So yeah, here I just found GPT-2 PubMed Medium, and it has the paper link and the model link, but this one does not seem to have a hosted API. And I think a lot of these types of models won't. I think because they're probably new and pretty, this one looks reasonably big as well. Probably Hugging Face just doesn't necessarily want to support every model.
And can you click on the files option?
Yes.
So all of these models are public. So if you click on files, the files that run this model, there's a 1.5 gig model there. So you can download these and run them on your laptops or on your workstations with GPUs. And that's what Hugging Face does, is they're the repository for trained models. They also sometimes host computational environments where you can execute models online, but it's just a way to share these things publicly.
Yes, and they also give you like some sort of I'm not going to say it's like a complete solution, but they offer ways that you can sort of deploy this in the cloud sort of automatically. You still need to fiddle with things. So it's not super straightforward, but it's better than building your own computer to run these things, especially if you're just trying to play around. But yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's like sort of where the world is going. Every field will have their own sort of specialized chatbot for at least now, because well, this GPT-2 model is not small, it's not nearly as gigantic as something like GPT-4. So this is something that you can actually use for specialized purposes. Yes, please.
So whoever asked that question, it sounded like Sripad, like let's see that. So if you want to do very specific work with literature search and then do inference from it, I highly recommend you talking to somebody in Mihai's group in computer science. They have built a lot of infrastructure around it to get such inference out of systems. And so while these are easy to use tools that you see, they'll always leave you with desiring more to complete a research question. Mihai's team has built the visualization and other pieces that go with it to then use it for decision making. So make sure you reach out to your colleagues who work in NLP, NLU space, and not feel that this is the only way to solve a question.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so going back to our paper QA, oh, I guess I left this out before, but we can do this again. They have the code that was used here, and then they give you these instructions again. So you have to enter your API key, which hopefully I still had copied. Okay, good. And then it lets you upload documents. I am just going to use this one, which was about chaotic dynamical systems. But the reason I chose it is because it's a fairly short paper with a fairly easy conclusion. So the question I asked before, I'm just going to take again. And we can try this with other ones. If you have any PDFs on your computer, go ahead and try it on your own. So you can upload multiple as well, but it will take longer and cost more the more documents you use. So then it will let you prompt just a question. I do find that it doesn't work super well if you give it like a directive, like list the 3 main points. It would be much better to say, what are the 3 main points? That's at least my experience. And then it has all of these sort of settings. So I'm going to let it be a little bit more verbose maybe. And because this is a short paper, chunks to examine and contexts to include is basically like how much of the paper or papers do you let it look at. In this case, it's a small paper, so this should work fine. As you do increase these, the cost per query will go up. But I'll go ahead and hit ask question, and then it'll do this little orange bar, and if nothing pops up right away, that's because it's still analyzing stuff. So you'll see then it has some document stats. The first time you do it, it has to load it in and look at stuff. Follow-up questions will just use the same thing. So you'll see it's one document with, they call it 8 chunks, so it fits into the entire thing. And I said, like, what in plain language are the conditions described in the system? And it basically says there must be a periodic point with period 3 and some other jargon, but this is more or less correct, and I would say reasonably plain language for a math paper.
And also notice that it's cited itself in which pages in the PDF that it got the information from. So you can go do your fact checking.
Yes. Yeah, and definitely always fact check it. I think every once in a while I will see it say like this paper solved this problem, where like that's like the actual like open questions in the discussion section or something. So it's not perfect, but it is a pretty good starting point for a lot of things. And then it will tell you how much basically stuff it used. Basically, here it cost me 1 cent to do this. So does anyone have examples of a paper or anything that would be readily accessible that we could ask questions about?
If we want to get fancy, you guys can share your screens. But yeah. Any results yet?
Yeah, has anyone tried this on their own?
So I put a paper in that I recently wanted to read. It said there were 56 chunks. And I just asked it, what are the brain regions involved in loneliness? It's a meta-analysis. And it gave me pages pages 19 to 20. Loneliness is associated with altered activity in frontoparietal, blah, blah, blah. And then it says like pages 19 to 20, the text does not provide a direct answer to this question. That's pretty cool.
Nice.
Did anyone try to upload many papers, more than 2 or 3?
The most I've ever done, I think, is 3.
Yeah, another hour. I'm turning this thing off.
Okay, it worked. Yeah, and sometimes it seems to be a little bit, it can be hit or miss on if it works the first time. Sometimes you have to re-upload papers. I'd also say every once in a while, like the text of a paper, just like however the model reads it doesn't quite work, and it will just like repeatedly tell you it can't answer a question. So that's something that you might, like if you download it from like not the journal site or something, it might be that metadata got messed up. So you might have to try another source of a PDF or something. Just something to keep in mind.
And there are at this point probably 24 PDF readers that are superior to this, but they also require you to put a credit card down.
Yeah. Yep.
The name of the plant is like written wrong. So it's not banana plant.
Also, I mean, that API key can work on many other apps on Hugging Face. So if you guys want to go look for some image segmentation apps or audio generators or whatever.
Hey, you're stealing what I was going to do next. Could you actually repeat that and summarize for the rest of the room? Because I think this is a good one. We had a couple good examples of this working, but over here we have a bad one. Oh, here we got a official mic for you.
So I have a paper that studies role of one protein in mentha plant. So when I uploaded the paper and like asked what are the key points that are described in the paper, so the name of the plant, so it shows the key points from the paper, but it got the name of the plant wrong. So instead of the mentha plant, so it says banana plant. So yeah, that is the main.
Yeah, so not ideal. This is why you always have to definitely sort of, this isn't probably the best way to understand papers, but a good way to get like key points from a paper that you already do understand is kind of what or like phrasing things in a different way. Yeah, so good catch. That's a fun one. Cool. Anyone else have anything else they want to share on just testing this out? Cool. So as you can imagine, working through different papers and text and being able to answer questions is pretty nice. But that's sort of not necessarily, it's only one part of research. You might have other things that you're working on. There's, as I mentioned, when you go to Hugging Face, it has all of the different models, and you can look at different, I'm in the wrong spot. Yeah, different sort of applications. So that would be maybe under document question answering. You could also do things, we already saw the image classification, which was fun. Image segmentation, I think, is another big one. And to this point, I would like to actually go away from Hugging Face for one moment and talk about this model from Meta called Segment Anything, which also has a really nice web demo. I'll go ahead and so this is just segment-anything.com, and it will bring you to a demo. Image segmentation is basically like trying to pick out individual objects or images or objects or like coherent things in an image. So here the base demo they give, you can hover your mouse over and it will pick out each of the dogs separately or the stick. Of course, just doing this with their images is not sufficient for your research, but maybe here I'll bring up my dog one more time, we'll see. So this lets you also do stuff with your own images. And the thing that I would say is a lot of these are like things you want to try out before you go deep into getting the model and automating it over your data. So there we go, it picks out my dog pretty well and actually excludes the backpack, which is pretty amazing, I would say. You can find whatever this little thingy in the background is. But maybe more interestingly, let's see, do I have somewhere I had a, yeah, we'll go with this, this image, which is from Lake Mead. So you can see the low water level, and maybe you set up a camera to automate watching this, and you could see the water level, and this model could pick out how much it goes up or down over time. It can also do things like you can just use it. There we go. You can just use it to segment basically everything it sees in the image, which is, I think, where segment anything sort of comes from. So this automatically picks out everything. So you can see how this might be useful for like biomedical imaging, maybe a good way to, at least give you a first pass at your data. So going back over to Hugging Face, this actually is a model that you can get in Hugging Face. It doesn't let you use it in the browser, but if you wanted to go out and do work like this, they have the model on Hugging Face. You can download it and use it. This is actually a fairly big model. Oh, now I have to find it. Checkpoints as well. So this one is, yeah, 3 gigs or so. So some of these are pretty heavyweight, but that's why it's nice that you can try them out in the browser beforehand. Okay, so does anyone want to take more time and play with Segment Anything? It's kind of fun to just play with, but I also have other stuff that we can cut too.
Can you go to the gallery? There's
Yes.
I think there's some biomedical images in the gallery.
That is, yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so yeah, they say this is research demo. Yeah, so we could go there. Let's just see what else we can find real quick. Yeah, let's go.
And I think the background of this, Meta trained this on something like 1 billion images.
Yeah, it's a large number, and it's like a lot of different styles of images, which I think is its real strength. So here we go. And basically what it does is it like looks at random spots here. You can kind of see it, those little dots. So if you run this a couple times, you might get different answers, particularly if you like cropped your image slightly differently. But here you go. You can see that this did I would say a pretty good job, at least matching what I would pick out as a non-expert. So this would be a really nice way to actually create more training data for a model that you fine tune. So that way you could make it really work well for whatever your type of data is down the line.
I don't want to hijack Andrew. Does anyone in here use Photoshop? Okay, look up Photoshop. I think it's generative fill. They just released this week.
I think they've also got something else with another fancy name that they just did.
Yeah, so there's new AI tools for building new images. Yeah, creating art, or just like if you cut off somebody's head in a photograph, it'll generate their forehead for you. Yeah, or yeah, get the photo bombers out.
Yep.
So stuff like this segment anything, where it is quantitative stuff, where so we plug it into a quantitative thing where you can get it to automatically count the little blobs in this picture or the width of that size of the indicator.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question was basically like, does segment anything allow you to basically tack on like quantitative stuff? Like, could you count how many blobs there are, or could you get like the sizes of each of them? The answer is sort of, I think. You would need to know some information about what it returns, and you'd have to sort of process that on your own, but it's fairly straightforward. When you do it in here, you cannot, but if you were to actually run the model on your own and get some output of it, it actually does give you like, here are the 37 blobs we found. And then it will have sort of their shapes. Oh, it does? Okay, see, I haven't played with it in here nearly enough.
Try to see all, or then just try to clear it and then try to just do one.
Yeah.
So select one.
Ah. Oh. I mean, it is like finding it. Okay, I'm gonna try just a different image real quick, just to see if maybe that's the. We need to have two. Great question.
But to answer the person who asked that, I saw one called Geo, was tuned for counting like pebbles or something.
Yeah, I've seen some that are like for counting airplanes or ships. So yes, but there's no like off the shelf ready to go. But you know, if you partnered with some computer science people like Nirav says, that I'm sure they could build it. Cool. Okay, so we've got, you know, sort of some literature review, and we've also got some image analysis stuff. I think the last thing that I would like to touch on is basically using this in your code. If you don't write code, this is okay. This won't take very long, and you don't need to know very much up front. But the basic thing that I would like to do, and I'm going to close all of this. So this is my code editor. It's VS Code. Also, is this the right spot? Yes. I'm actually going to restart it because I think something, yeah, okay. So I'm using VS Code here. It's fine, I guess, if you use a different editor. I used to be, for those who care, a Vim guy, and all of this technology finally made me switch because it was way easier in VS Code. But there's a few things about this that I think are really handy. So the first is if you install certain extensions. So I've got a ChatGPT one, and I've got a GitHub Copilot one. I've already put my API keys in, but when you install these, they basically will pop up a little window. You paste in your API key and you're good to go. It's that easy. So I'm going to get rid of that. And then Copilot basically will work in your code editing and give you suggestions along the way. This is the exact same as like ChatGPT spitting out responses for you. But there's also a ChatGPT plugin. There's actually a lot of them. I recently have been using this Genie one because it has a nice user interface. So maybe I'll say, how do I create a data frame with 2 columns of random data? And you don't have to be too specific about this, because it kind of already lives in this code world. So it writes a bunch of code. Let's see if this works. Oh, it even gives you a way to insert it over here. So you can just click insert and it will put it into your code right away. And we can try and run that. And so there we go. We've got 2 columns with a bunch of random data. Now, okay, so now let's say if I do, I'll show off a Copilot thing, and this is, I hope, yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna give it a comment and say, create a figure that plots the columns of DF. Okay, and then I'll let it just tab complete. So I didn't write any of that code. Oh, I didn't run my first part. So I didn't write any of this code. I just wrote this thing, create a figure that plots the columns of DF. And so all I hit was tab, 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 and then it made my plot for me. So pretty handy.
You guys all know Python now.
Yes, exactly. That's my key, is like, even if you know, knowing enough to just get started is enough to write code now. Like, as long as you know the first like 10 things about Python, you now can do stuff like this. And you can actually do way more complicated things. So here, let's see if this works. So I wanted to just see if I could get it to make a sort of complicated figure layout. So 4 subplots with basically like 1 across the top and then 3 on the bottom. So let's see if it does it. It's already wrong, but that's okay. Let's see what it does give us. And sometimes when it doesn't give you a suggestion, you just have to hit enter and wait for it. Okay. And this is actually something I used it for just last week, because I'm terrible at remembering how to do these things. But there we go. It almost got what I wanted. I wanted there to be 3 down here, but working off of this, I now kind of at least can see the structure and can go, okay, what I actually wanted was, I think, this maybe. And then let's try if I can do this. Let's see if this actually does it. 2. Yeah, there we go. So it gives you something to work off of that you can hopefully, once you see the structure, can start to play around with and make things work. So that was basically the last sort of interactive thing I wanted to show. But the last thing that I wanted to actually talk about just very briefly and not get into it. We've talked a lot about like these off-the-shelf things being nice. They're fun to play around with. But it's pretty hard to go to the next step. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question if there's functionality like that for Jupyter Notebooks or Jupyter Labs.
That is Jupyter Notebook.
Well, it's in VS Code, but
Can you?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
yes, you can. I find the VS Code version to be way.
Yep.
Yeah.
And just maybe to add one more thing. So VS Code, GitHub Copilot are all part of this GitHub ecosystem. Go to education.github.com, register with your Arizona.edu account. You can get free Copilot.
Yes.
And free code spaces with
Yeah.
these free virtual machines.
Yeah, by default, Copilot, I think, costs like a few dollars a month, like $8, I think. So don't give up your Netflix for it. The last thing that I wanted to just mention is actually deploying these models is really hard, particularly if you have to like log on to some server and install all of the software and stuff. There are a bunch of companies out there that are making this easier. Particularly, you saw in here, of course, I went to a different model. There was a sort of deploy with SageMaker or Azure ML. Those platforms are pretty nice. There's also new platforms that are popping up that I think are pretty exciting. I'm not going to go over using them because it gets too technical too fast, but I just wanted to like highlight these. There's this company called Modal, which basically you can write all of your code and then only the part that needs the GPUs and the big machine learning model. They basically send a little request to their servers, run the little model that they need to run or big model, and then return back what you wanted out. So basically you only have to run on the big machines for as long as it takes to actually run the small bit of stuff you wanted. And then all of the rest of your stuff you can do on your laptop or whatever. So if you are finding yourself wanting to go bigger, try to look into some of these things. The world is growing super fast at this point. I'm sure there are 20 other companies that can do this. But point is, don't waste a ton of money if you're, to buy some huge machine and then only use it 5% of the time. Cool.
We're back on schedule. Excellent job, Andrew.
Thank you.
So at this point, we can open up for a little discussion. If you guys are ready to bail out of here and get back to your lives, you're welcome to leave. But yeah, thank you guys for participating in our first workshop. We will probably send an email asking for some feedback, and we appreciate any feedback you can give us so that the next time we teach it, we can do it a little bit better. Okay, thanks to all the other presenters, and thank you to Tina and Rudy and other folks that put all the logistics together.
Oh, you figured it out?
Yeah.
Okay, we figured something out here, or Nirav has. I had nothing to do with it.
You have to click on cutout and then.
Okay, so after you do that, everything, then you can click, there's like a little cutout button, and now you can start to, now can I click on these and get stats?
I don't think it gives us stats.
Okay, if you, it's just the tail. But if you do this on like the Hugging Face stuff, it will give you the cutouts as individual things that you can analyze.
And Andrew, one more thing for people that the campus HPC, the campus system has GPUs. So if you're spending money outside, first use all your campus allocation before you go and burn money outside. And you can run a Jupyter notebook on the campus system. So each PI gets, I think at this point, 100,000 hours or something, I forget, but
10,000 a month.
that sounds too less.
Did they upgrade it?
Yeah, it should be at least 40, I remember, which was a while back. So, but you have access to GPUs. They're not the fastest in the world, but they're definitely faster than Colab. So don't bang your head against free resources when you have something that's available at no cost to you at campus. Learn how to use everything everywhere all the time.
There you go, easy peasy. Okay, I guess it's 100,000. Wow, I gotta start doing more stuff. Cool. Well, thank you all for hanging out. I think I'll stay here for the next little bit if people want to have discussion or questions, but I'm going to turn off the mic at this point.